The world could be a better place with love and unity. Together, we shall conquer the world. Linkway Diplomats is working to solve problems in needy areas such as water problem, community empowerment, community health, basic education, temporary shelters for homeless and travelers, rehabilitation and integration for inmates. Linkway Diplomats, linking people with people. Your community resource network.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Linkway Heroes of Peace, an interfaith collaboration for community peace. My name is Melba Miles, and I am your host for today. Our guest today is LaQuesh Agnew. She has a Master of Education. She is someone that is dedicated to peace and promoting peace within the community as it relates specifically to mental health. So, LaQuesh, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. Welcome. We are so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, as a peace advocate, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Certainly. And again, thank you for having me. My background is primarily in education and social services. And through that work, I have worked with people of all ages, from children to adults. And I've also been a program manager. And my goal is always to work with those who come from marginalized backgrounds, at-risk children, the elderly, people who are homeless, women from domestic violence backgrounds, individuals who are in the throes of addiction, and also individuals who struggle with mental health conditions. And I found that through my career, working with these individuals and serving them, that I needed to connect more with the professionals and the people who are providing services, because that was the missing link for me, that the people on those front lines did not really know how to serve those individuals well through their challenges. So I started working with professionals and teaching them how to work with and advocate for others who come from those marginalized backgrounds.
Wow. So you are an educator, a coach, a speaker. You are a complete package.
Thank you.
And you have a passion for those, like you mentioned, that are marginalized, that it seems like society has forgotten.
Absolutely.
So, LaQuesh, Miss Askew, I cannot wait to get into this conversation with you. But first, we have to take a quick commercial break, and then we will get into how you advance peace within the community through the focus on mental health and challenges. So stay tuned. We will be right back on Linkway Heroes of Peace.
Dida hospitals, not just the building, but highly equipped with great infrastructure, because our aim and our goal is to be a world-class healthcare provider using cutting-edge technology.
Being a part of Dida Hospital has inspired me to keep walking the line and remaining strong in my values.
It's our joy to see baby being delivered, whether premature or term, because the mother, the joy that radiates after being discharged.
This would not have been possible if our patient did not believe in our ability.
We do virtually all kinds of clinical investigations and use all forms of diagnostic method.
Quality healthcare is what we do. Quality service is what we deliver.
And here, caring for our patients means we feel what they feel.
Being rewarded with the content smiles of happy clients is my perfect Dida story.
The world could be a better place with love and unity. Together, we shall conquer the world. Linkway Diplomats is working to solve problems in needy areas such as water problem, community empowerment, community health, basic education, temporary shelters for homeless and travelers, rehabilitation and integration for inmates. Linkway Diplomats, linking people with people. Your community resource network.
Welcome back to another episode, episode 3 of Linkway Heroes of Peace. And before our commercial break, I introduced our guest today, which is LaQuesh Agnew. She is a Master of Education. She is a coach. She is a community educator, as well as a professional speaker. Welcome back to the show, LaQuesh.
Thank you.
How do you mention that you're focused? You are focused on those that are marginalized within the community, those that are often forgotten, those that people tend to look over, those that society tends to deem out, those that society wants to overlook because people are afraid if they notice them, if they look at them, then they may draw attention to themselves. Um, how did you become passionate about this segment of population?
I've always been taught to meet people where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And to meet people where they are is to really take a look at, walking in the shoes of someone who has gone through some things. And quite honestly, we have all gone through some things, whether
Yes.
we like to share it or not. And for others, it takes a while for them to bounce back. Those of us who are blessed to have great coping skills and resources to be able to bounce back, we can function through our lives without, any interruption. But for those individuals in those marginalized communities, they often need someone to look out for them, someone to advocate for them. And I find that I make connections with those individuals and I'm able to make a difference in those ways.
One of the things that you mentioned two things that I want to reflect upon or go back to. You mentioned coping and you mentioned resources. So, in terms of coping, how does mental health services, how does coping, help to deal with peace? Because our focus is always peace. So, how, in terms of assisting people with coping in what's going on in their lives and in society as a whole, how does that advance peace?
Coping skills is, I think, one of the most important life skills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it teaches us resilience. It teaches us
Yes.
how to get through those tough times and how to, again, be able to navigate everything that's happening in the world that we see today. I think that a lot of those problems and issues that we see in the world are always going to exist in some capacity, right? But our ability to cope with those things makes the difference in how we are able to survive. And in my tagline, I talk about thriving, not just surviving. Surviving means just getting by, right? But thriving is to be able to navigate and go through the ups and downs of life and be able to cope with realities as they happen.
And I love that tagline. That is something that I'm going to take and utilize. So I'm going to copy that. Thriving, not just surviving, because a lot of us have been just surviving.
Right, right.
And when something happens that tips us over the edge, it destroys our peace.
Exactly.
And when our peace is destroyed personally, we tend to destroy someone else's peace.
Right. It's often said that hurt people hurt people.
Yes.
And when people live in a constant state of dysfunction and chaos and interruptions in life, it's like misery loves company. So they continue to manifest that misery in the world. And to be an advocate for peace, again, meeting people where they are, you want to show people through my example, through other people's example, that there's a different way. And, when we learn how to cope and we learn how to live with purpose, then we can thrive and then we can grow towards those things that help us to live well.
When you mentioned that, I love movies, and this is completely off script, but I love movies And there was a movie that came out a long time ago called Misery. I don't know if you ever seen that movie. Okay, you saw that movie. I just thought about how unhappy the person in the movie was and how she made someone else's life. Actually, every person she met, she made their life miserable as well.
Right.
And that's what happens when we are not, when we're only surviving and not thriving.
Right, right. It's just like something snaps in an individual. And when that happens, when their mental health is off, then they make people around them miserable as well. I think that's why we see so much crime and just so much chaos happening in the world, happening in society. We watch the news and there's always a headline about something happening, and they always want to tie it to the individual's mental health. And so I pick up on that constantly, and I'm always thinking, how can I do my part to make sure that people thrive and not just survive and not get to that breaking point? Some people get to that breaking point and it's the point of no return, and they have nothing to lose. And as a result of that, it's a ripple effect because so many people get hurt in the process.
And you mentioned a key point as to why we have violent crimes. They have nothing to lose, or they feel as if they have nothing to lose. They go from thriving to just surviving, and then after just surviving, I have nothing to lose.
Absolutely.
And then there goes the peace.
Yes. Unfortunately, it happens way too often, and we see that it is the destruction of families. You know, we see parents hurting their children or deserting their children, and we see adults abusing the elderly, abusing their parents. And it's like a never-ending cycle. It doesn't matter what age you are, what ethnic background you come from, you can be affected directly or indirectly by someone else's chaos.
Directly or indirectly by someone else's chaos, which is caused by the lack of peace, which is caused by surviving and not thriving. So we are going to take a commercial break here because you have given us a lot to contemplate, to think about, to analyze. And we will be right back as we talk about really the focus on mental health, because the battle is in the mind. The battle is in the mind.
Absolutely.
And then from there, our thoughts become our actions.
Yes, yes.
So we're going to go to commercial break, and we will be back here on Linkway Heroes of Peace.
Thanks for staying with us. To complement government's efforts at providing portable drinking water, a United States-based non-governmental organization has provided a borehole to address the water challenge being faced by the Zangie community in Nasarawa State. Agatha Joseph Obioha reports.
Water, they said, is life. This is the river where the gay community access their drinking water. Residents of this community, located in Kari local government area of Nasarawa State, are predominantly farmers and lack access to potable drinking water for decades before Linkway Africa came to their aid.
Our passion is to meet the critical needs of the needy communities.
Our vision is to provide water support, education support, and then health support and food support.
And it's this community that is benefiting for the first time from within the African region.
The community, who could not hide their joy, expressed gratitude to the donors and pledged to make proper use of the facility.
Yes, sir, I'm happy with them. The thing that we are doing for this village, for the village of Zangie, we are happy with them. because we have been suffering for water for so long, which is why sometimes we don't have water able to take our bath, no water to take bath. But for today, we are very, very happy for that.
Before we dey suffer, what they drink this river water, what they go, disease everywhere.
Linkway African Outreach Ministry is a faith-based non-governmental organization which was incorporated in 2010 to care for people and communities in need. From Kefi, Agatha Joseph Obioha, NTA News.
Hi, welcome back. And we are so glad that you are tuning in with us today. We are having a lively conversation about peace as it relates to our health, our mental health, because we know that the battle is in the mind, or the battle starts in the mind. And we have been talking to LaQuesh Agnew. She is an expert in the field of mental health. She has a Master of Education. She is a public speaker, coach. She is an educator, and she's given us a quote. And if, in my bathroom, I have, and don't laugh, but I have little bitty Post-it notes of different quotes, different scriptures, different motivational quotes. And when she said a quote earlier, I think I'm going to write it down. It talked about the fact that we should be thriving and not just surviving. A lot of us are just surviving. We're going day to day, just barely making it through our day. And that is not God's intent for us. He wants us to thrive. So thank you for that quote. It's going to go on my wall.
Awesome.
It's going on my wall. I wanted to ask you about COVID. We know that it just came in like a blast. The world didn't know how to deal with it. We didn't know how to deal with it. We are coping with it now. In terms of mental health, how has it affected those that are marginalized?
Well, the pandemic has changed everyone's life.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who are in marginalized communities and marginalized groups, so much was exposed. It was like the Band-Aid was ripped off of people's hurt and things that they were dealing with behind closed doors and dealing with alone. And I always thought through the pandemic about individuals who were forced to shelter in place with their abusers, women and children who were forced to stay at home with the individual that was abusing them and harming them. And for the elderly people who had to isolate, who could not be around others because they were in the most highest risk group. And I think about those individuals who just, through everything that was happening, a lot of the misinformation and a lot of the fear that was spreading, how many people who were suffering through that. And
these were not people that were disappointed because they couldn't go to the movies or go bowling. These are people whose very health and physical well-being was directly affected, because you mentioned being at home with someone that was abusing them, the elderly being shut in and not able to get the resources and things that they need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Children who suffered, not being able to go to school and to have their ability to learn compromised, and people who just were dealing with so many things. It was just widely exposed. And, even though we are coping better now overall with the pandemic, there are still people who are suffering. And we find that every day when people are going into the clinics to seek help, or they're in the throes of a mental health crisis. We hear about people hurting each other and also hurting themselves to the point that they need uh, mental health care in inpatient hospitals. And so it's just become more widespread. We see it daily. We see it daily happening.
You mentioned children, and typically society overlooks kids because they feel like a child is too young to deal with these types of issues. Children, they feel like children are not stressed. I remember my son came home from school one day. He said, Mommy, and he was talking about a friend of his at school. He was in elementary school. He said, I'm concerned about my friend because she's sad. And I said, well, why is she sad? She said, well, her dad left. And he said the little girl was at school crying. That is a stressful situation that she was dealing with as a child. Children are dealing with stressful situations. They're dealing with, family relationships. They're dealing with, what is it called? Food insecurity, which is a new word. Never thought I would hear food and insecurity in the same sentence. But they're dealing with things that, are going to affect them.
Absolutely.
Possibly for the rest of their lives.
Yes, it does leave a mark on children. And a lot of times adults overlook it. They think that children are not paying attention, that children do not absorb the things that are happening in their environments. And one of the very core things, children being out of school through the pandemic, it affected their mental health because they were isolated from their friends. Kids need socialization, right? And when you spoke about food insecurity, there are kids who their families don't have enough to provide 3 meals a day. And so when they go to school, they can at least get 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch. And when that was taken away from them, we saw so many ministries, which I thought was great, do food boxes and food giveaways. And you saw the lines just wrapped around parking lots because so many people were in need. But then, in addition to that, children, every generation suffers in different ways, right? And so with children, when they see their parents hurt, they hurt. Just like when your son expressed what was happening with his classmate, kids pick up on each other's feelings. They understand a lot more than what we give them credit for. And when a child is worried about their parents, they're worried about where their next meal is going to come from. They're worried about when they go home if the electricity is going to be on because now mom or dad is out of work and there's no money to pay the bills. That affects their ability to be able to cope and learn on their age appropriate level. And what I've learned in my work with children is that the counselors in school are not really equipped to deal with the emotional and the behavioral aspect of what kids go to. The counselors in school, their focus is on academics. And so there needs to be incorporation of more mental health professionals in the school that can work with kids on an age appropriate basis so that those two systems can come together, the academic and the social emotional, to make sure that those kids are well rounded. And if we don't teach the kids the necessary coping skills that they need, then they're going to grow up into adults who have poor coping skills. And we know when adults have poor coping skills, they fall into the throes of addiction or abuse, or they, become criminals because they haven't had the necessary support when they were younger.
All of that is a disruption of peace.
Absolutely.
Because when you have children that are stressed, that are worried, again, it affects their social ability to socialize and to perform academically, which sometimes brings out aggression in them, which sometimes causes other children to tease them.
Absolutely. And so bullying is on the rise in the schools. They experience it through social media. They experience it
Yes.
in schools. And, and sometimes, unfortunately, they experience it in the home because they may have older siblings that are emotionally abusive or parents who are emotionally abusive. And no one understands how damaging that could be to a child's psyche, and how those things trigger different behaviors, and it causes them to act out.
And you brought up a key point in terms of the internet. When we were in school, I'm only 21, but when we were in school,
Me too. Me too.
When we were in school, when we left school, the bullying stopped. But now with social media, it's on their phone. It could be 24 hours a day that they are being bullied, that they are exposed to it. It's not just when they're in school. So again, it's a whole new set of problems.
And research has shown we focus on kids. We don't want them to be addicted to anything, but we more so focus on just say no to drugs and don't do drugs, but we never think don't do social media, and that kids are becoming addicted to social media in a way that is unhealthy, right? And it's ongoing. And the sad part of it is that not only are the kids addicted to the social media, but many adults are as well. And so where is the line that is drawn to help people to get beyond being attached to social media and being attached to those things that are ultimately unhealthy for them?
And that is so true, because on social media, you don't have to you don't have to know how to cope and to deal with other personalities. You can say what you want to say and be who you want to be. And if someone doesn't like it, you can shut them off social media.
Exactly. Or you can hide behind anonymous names or different
Yes.
names.
They
And
call it catfish.
right. And create damage and wreak havoc on people's lives. So there's constantly something that, will affect individuals, social media or in the real world.
Yes. So we're going to take a commercial break here and let people go to their phones and go to our website and download the website. Go to our website, look at all of the fabulous things that we are doing here at Linkway, and subscribe. So we will be back as we continue to talk about peace and mental health and thriving and not just surviving. So stay tuned.
Leader hospitals, not just the building, but highly equipped with a great infrastructure, because our aim and our goal is to be a world-class healthcare provider using cutting-edge technology.
Being a part of Dida Hospital has inspired me to keep walking the line and remaining strong in my values.
It's our joy to see baby being delivered, whether premature or term, because the mother, the joy that radiates after being discharged.
This would not have been possible if our patient did not believe in our ability.
We do virtually all kinds of clinical investigations and use all forms of diagnostic method.
Quality healthcare is what we do. Quality service is what we deliver.
And here, caring for our patients means we feel what they feel.
Being rewarded with the content smiles of happy clients is my perfect Dida story.
The world could be a better place with love and unity. Together, we shall conquer the world. Linkway Diplomats is working to solve problems in needy areas such as water problem, community empowerment, community health, basic education, temporary shelters for homeless and travelers, rehabilitation and integration for inmates. Linkway Diplomats, linking people with people. Your community resource network.
Do you want to live stream your seminars, workshops, funeral, conferences, blogs, or interviews on your Facebook page or your own YouTube channel? Offstage Pass can do just that. Call us today at 678-480-1161 or visit our website at www.offstagepass.com for more information.
Welcome back to our show. And we've been having an awesome discussion with LaQuesh Agnew. She is a master educator, speaker, coach. She is an expert in the field of mental health. We've been having a discussion about mental health as it specifically relates to kids. A lot of times our focus is on, kids not having food and not having resources, but there is not often a focus on their mental health. The only time that people focus on kids' mental health is if there's a school shooting. And then there's a focus on, well, why did that child do that? But let's talk about what happened before Johnny or Sally got to that point. So what are some resources that are available to parents when they see their child being bullied, when they see their child is stressed, when they see their child is not able to focus, when they see that there are issues, in terms of their performance or mental health?
Absolutely. So when we think of our children, right, when it's time for their annual physical, we make sure they get to the doctor. We make sure that they have their physical. We take them to the dentist to have their teeth checked. We'll take them to the eye doctor to have their eyes checked, but never does anyone talk about taking their child to a psychologist to make sure that their minds are checked. And we want to make sure that we encourage parents to take their children for mental health assessments when they see that their children are struggling. If they see that their child is depressed or withdrawn or they're isolating or they're just not the same child that they used to be, right? If we know that our child gets a cold, we want to rush.
Yes.
Assessment when we know that they're struggling with something emotionally. And I think at the very core, we have to encourage parents, especially in our community, right? There's always a stigma tied around mental health. And, we have that fear of being labeled. We don't want our children to be labeled. We don't want our kids to be placed in special ed or placed in the bad class because, they're going through something. But I found in my experience in working with kids is that when parents have the courage to have their children properly assessed, then they get opened up to other resources that can really help them. Therapists that can come to the home and therapists who can customize therapy and do play therapy with children. There are specialists out there who know how to tailor therapy to the age of the child. And so they make it personal so that they can get to the core of what's happening. And for younger children, especially, children communicate through play. Right. And so a lot of times as adults, we're very dismissive when we see kids playing. But if we really pay attention and focus to how they are playing, we learn a lot about those children. And so we just want to make sure that we encourage parents to take their children for mental health assessments as routinely as they take their children for physicals every year, for their dental checkups, for their vision checkups, and they should have a mental health checkup as well.
And that is very, very good because, again, our kids get a yearly checkup, yearly annual physical, eye exam, physical exam, but we never think about their mental health. Never.
Right. And it could be, they could, with all of the back to school activities.
That's just so.
all of the back to school activities you hear about, they're doing
Yes.
all of these different screenings, right? They'll do the sports screening, the vision screenings, the hearing screenings, all of these different screenings, but the mental health screenings are often left out because no one wants to, face the fact or admit that maybe their child has a problem. And when those problems go unaddressed, right, they continue to spiral out of control. And before you know it, there's a teenager who is threatening someone else's life
or
because
threatening their own life.
or threatening their own life because suicide
Yes.
behaviors in children are on the rise,
And
unfortunately.
when I see on the news that a child has committed suicide, knowing that there was a possibility that an adult knew and did not get the assistance that the child needed.
Mhm. Or that their friends knew something was
Or
going
their
on
friends, yeah.
and the children didn't feel that they could safely talk to an adult about it. When my child was in school, I often told her and encouraged her, if your friends are going through something, don't hide that, say something.
Say
And,
something.
oftentimes there is the saying, what is the saying in our community? Snitches get stitches, right?
Snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches, right? So kids are taught from an early age not to tell when they clearly know that something is going on in their peer group, right? It's not cool to tell. And what happens is that those kids suffer. And then what also happens, we see and we hear on the news a lot that these kids as early as 10 and 11 years old are getting into gang activity, right? Because they connect with people who they can relate to and people who will listen to them when their parents or the adults in their lives are dismissive. And then when they get into that community, they feel, well, I'm accepted here, so I'm going to do what they do. And
once
we
they get
wonder
into
why.
that community, it's hard for them to shift out of it.
Exactly.
Wow.
And
And
so we
then
just have to encourage them to get the necessary screenings and get the help that they need that is age appropriate for them.
that, I don't know, that's just very upsetting to me. Very upsetting to me. But let's shift a little bit and go and talk about adults. Let's focus on women. Women, domestic violence, um, violence outside of the home. What are some resources that are available to women that are seeking peace in their home, peace in their mind, peace in their families?
There are different programs throughout Atlanta. Most counties have at least one shelter program for women coming from domestic violence situations. But what happens a lot is that it's too hard for the women to get to those programs until something drastic happens, right?
Wait,
And
what do you mean? Wait. I'm sorry. What do you mean too hard?
it's too hard.
Physically or
It's too
mentally or?
hard for them to physically leave the abuser.
Oh, wow.
It's too hard. And, there's women who suffer in silence. A lot of times women stay because the abuser threatens to harm the children, or the abuser threatens to harm them, and the abuser puts them in these compromising situations to where even if they wanted to get help and wanted to get away, it's almost impossible for them to break away. Fear sets in a lot of times, but domestic abuse is all about control, right? And when the women are being controlled by their abusers, they tend to, again, their coping mechanism is to try to make peace and to try to deal with what the abuser is dishing out. And I've worked with a lot of women in the past that say that they go to somewhere in their mind where they just kind of shut down, and they feel like if they, you know, do what the abuser says, if they stay calm, that the abuse will stop. Right. And that is just another control tactic of the abuser. So it's hard for some women to leave physically because it's too hard for them to separate and leave mentally. And as
So
you said before, it starts in the mind. So if their mind is telling them that they can't leave because they won't be able to thrive if they leave, they won't be able to, get resources, they won't be able to, connect with others. And sometimes women who come from domestic abuse situations, they have burned bridges with family members because they stayed with the abuser. So it's really hard. It's a isolating feeling to be in that type of situation.
So, in terms of the marginalized population, what can faith leaders, what can politicians do, what can we do to increase the peace among these various groups?
Right? Community partners coming together. And in a lot of ministries, there are members in the congregations who have special skill sets. There are members of different ministries who come from clinical backgrounds or who are therapists, that maybe if that church starts a ministry within the church to help those with mental health challenges, they can pull from the members who they have right in their congregations. And if there are members who are not therapists, then they can go to the local clinics and partner to, if you know someone is suffering, take them by the hand to go get help. A lot of times people can't get to the resources. They don't have the transportation. They don't have the money. They don't have the health care. And so the church can stand in the gap there to help those individuals, give them a ride to appointments, and, raise funds to help with outpatient appointments and things of that nature that will normalize getting help. When we
You said
see
something.
individuals suffering, the elderly, we have ministries that will go take meals to the elderly. They'll take fans and or heaters or different things to the elderly when they know that they need them. But people who suffer from mental health conditions, typically there's not that connection there. And again, it just causes people to suffer.
Because it's not something that's sometimes visible.
Right,
If
right.
you see someone that's homeless or you see someone elderly, that is something you can visually see, but you can't see if someone is thinking suicidal thoughts, or they're in domestic abuse sometimes, or if the child is struggling mentally. A lot of times those are not visual aspects of what we can see. So
Exactly.
sometimes they go overlooked, or sometimes people just don't want to get involved.
Right. Or they just don't know how to ask those questions,
Yes.
how to ask those hard questions. How are you feeling? And if the person says, well, I'm thinking about taking my life, a lot of times we tell people, oh, you shouldn't do that, but you never ask why. You always tell the person, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. But we have to be comfortable and step outside of our comfort zone, but be comfortable in asking those hard questions, because that's the only way people are going to open up and be willing to get the help. If they understand that you're willing to sit and talk with them, meet them where they are, ask the necessary questions and say, you know what, I think I can take you somewhere where you can get help, or I know of a place where you can go get help. Will you be willing to go? Right? So sometimes it starts with just a basic conversation, listening and meeting the individual where they are. And, even through the hard things that people may share, just to say, wow, I imagine that that is very hard for you. And I may not have the answers, but I can take you someplace where you can get help.
And thank you for giving us a response, because sometimes we see people are troubled, we see things that are going on, and we feel overwhelmed or unequipped to deal with those things. So we just tend to overlook them. But the response you gave is a response that we all can utilize, and said, I may not have the tools to assist you, but let me assist you, or let me take you, or let me contact someone that does. And that is something we all can do.
Right. When I work with individuals who are struggling, one of the main things that I'll say is help me help you, right?
Wow.
Because I need the person's help in being open and being willing. And when they're willing to accept help, then I will communicate that I'm willing to help them get the help, right? So it's about bridging the gap, and it is about standing and interceding for people, meeting them where they are, and being able and willing to take them to the next level. We don't want to leave anyone behind.
Mm-hmm. Yes. There is a quote by the military called No Man Left Behind. Whenever you see a war movie, whenever you see a documentary about war, those soldiers will go back and get their comrade that has fallen on the battlefield. And that person can be, just, expired, gone, but they will go back and get them in whatever condition that person may be. They do not leave anyone on the battlefield. And so often we've been so guilty of doing that.
Just imagine, as peace advocates, if every one of us who sees someone struggling, we go back and get them and take them where they need to go, right? We see that child struggling in school, we go back and we reach back for that child and make sure they have the necessary assessment. We see the woman struggling and we know that she's in an abusive relationship, and we reach back and we go and say, you know what, let me take you somewhere where you can get some help. So if we have the willingness to reach back and help those, just in that analogy that you gave.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It is. Because a lot of times, even when we're going through things, we've been trained to say, when someone says, well, how are you doing? And we'll say, I'm okay, things are good, even if they're not. And sometimes when we ask someone how they are doing, we know that they are going through something. Like you said, we need to reach back.
Mm-hmm.
We need to follow up. We need to say, hey, I know you're going through this. I may not be able to help you, but let me assist you with some resources. And that is the example that we have, in Jesus.
Right. And that's something that each and every one of us could do, whether you have a degree or any professional certifications. It is just human to human connection, and being caring and compassionate enough to say, I know that person is struggling and I might not be able to do a lot, but what I can do is reach back and try and help.
Yes. Well, we're going to allow our audience to savor on that for a few seconds while we go to commercial break. Remember to go to our website at www.linkwaydiplomats.org. Check out everything that we're doing. Subscribe to us. We're going to take a commercial break, and we will be back and continue our conversation with LaQuesh Agnew. Thank you.
Not just the building, but highly equipped with a great infrastructure, because our aim and our goal is to be a world-class healthcare provider using cutting-edge technology.
Being a part of Dida Hospital has inspired me to keep walking the line and remaining strong in my values.
It's our joy to see baby being delivered, whether premature or term, because the mother, the joy that radiates after being discharged.
This would not have been possible if our patient did not believe in our ability.
We do virtually all kinds of clinical investigations and use all forms of diagnostic method.
Quality healthcare is what we do. Quality service is what we deliver.
And here, caring for our patients means we feel what they feel.
Being rewarded with the content smiles of happy clients is my perfect Dida story.
The world could be a better place with love and unity. Together, we shall conquer the world. Linkway Diplomats is working to solve problems in needy areas such as water problem, community empowerment, community health, basic education, temporary shelters for homeless and travelers, rehabilitation and integration for inmates. Linkway Diplomats, linking people with people. Your community resource network.
Welcome back to our show. Again, we are having a in-depth, profound conversation as it relates to our mental health. We know that the battle starts in the mind, and we are having a conversation about mental health and personal peace as well as community peace. And before we went to break, we were talking about various resources and how we should never leave a comrade in the battlefield. When we see someone is struggling, we may not have the resources to assist them, but we can always direct them to different resources. So it goes beyond just, I hope you feel better. I hope everything's get better. But hey, let me show you this, or let me tell you this, or let me take you to this website, or let me assist you with this resource. And you were going to provide some additional websites.
Sure, yes. So for anyone who is struggling, there are so many different programs. And I think if you start with the broader national programs, then you can find something that is more local and specific to your area. One that I would recommend is the National Institute on Mental Health. And from that website, there are local, state, regional, and local chapters that individuals may find resources that are applicable to them. And for other populations who are dealing with addiction, they can go to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which in my field we call SAMHSA. And again, there are resources linked to different regions and areas. And always the CDC has information to a broad base of different mental health conditions and things that people can, again, look for the appropriate services in their areas to get more specific help for what they're dealing with. So on the national, state, and county websites, there are always resources that individuals can pull from for the different things that they may be going through and dealing with.
Perfect. One of the things that you mentioned that I wanted to circle back around to were coping, how to cope. Can you talk about some various coping methods before we bring the show to an end and give people some ray of hope? What are some ways or different methods for them to cope with stress and things that are going on?
Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned you do, I think is great. And you talked about having Post-it notes around.
Oh,
right?
I do.
Post-it notes with different affirmations, right? Because people...
Scriptures, affirmations, things that I want to accomplish.
Scriptures, affirmations, people know...
Look, wait, I even have them in my kids' bathroom.
So people know what they identify with, right? And you want to feed your mind, body, and soul with those words on a regular basis, right? And I think another thing that people need to realize is that self-care is not selfish, right? You want to be able to take care of yourself. So for me, it's walking, and it is, being a part of different communities, right? And I like to link with different people because I like to learn about different individuals' cultures, how they cope in the world and how it might be applicable in my world. And so I just broaden my horizons. But whatever helps you to be centered and well balanced, I think is what you should give yourself a dose of every day. And if you need more extensive help, be willing to go get it. But those positive affirmations, feeding scripture to yourself, linking with others and not isolating, finding ways to exercise, and making sure that we stimulate our minds, right? Because you made very important points that it starts with the mind. So we have to take care of our minds and be able to go through a detox, right? Turn away from those things that are negative and unhealthy and feed ourselves with the things that are positive and enriching. And that could be through music, it could be through ministry, it could be through reading or whatever, would help you to stay centered. That's what you should focus on. And if that doesn't work, get help.
Get help. One of the things, and just want to piggyback off this, and then one of the things that often happens, and is, you mentioned this, do not isolate yourself. I love watching nature shows, And one of the things that if you watch animals when they are hunters, like the lion and the tigers, they watch and they wait until an animal is isolated. They don't attack an animal in a herd. They wait until the animal is isolated and then they attack. So when we isolate ourselves, and I know you're going to speak about this as the expert. I'm not the expert, you are. When we isolate ourselves, it increases the stress, or it increases the attack that is on our mind.
It increases the risk for the enemy to come in and
Yes.
put those negative thoughts in our mind that
they just overflow.
Exactly, right? And so when you surround yourself with other healthy people, then your likelihood of staying healthy is a lot greater than when you isolate and get alone in negative thoughts. And it doesn't take much for the enemy to get in, to seep in. And, especially for vulnerable populations who are already suffering, who already have a level of stress, and who already have a level of suffering, it doesn't take much to bring those individuals down faster. And so we have to make sure that we encourage those individuals to take care of self. Because one thing we say a lot in my field is that if you don't pour into yourself, then you can't pour into others. So you have to replenish, and you have to surround yourselves with the things that make you healthy. And when you do that, then you can help other people.
And thank you for those tips. Thank you for the wealth of information that you have provided for us today. The quote, thriving and not just surviving, we should all think about ways that we can do that each and every day when we wake up. I'm not just going to survive today, I'm going to thrive.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's going on my Post-it notes.
Awesome.
But you have been a wealth of information. Thank you for the work that you're doing in the community, within the educators, within the school system. I do think that you are making a profound difference in our world.
Thank you.
Thank you for accepting our invitation to be a part of Linkway today.
My pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. It was my honor.
Yes, and we want to thank our audience again for spending this time with us. We hope that we have given you some strategies, some information, just a little bit of hope as we seek to further peace within our community and our world. We want to thank you for watching, and we would love for you to tune in to future shows, to subscribe to us at our website, www.linkwaydiplomats.org. Thank you for tuning in, and we would love to see you on future shows. Follow us on social media platforms. My name is Melba Miles. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.